My name is Melissa Moore, and I'm the Arts Education and Community Outreach Supervisor at the Walters Cultural Arts Center. Thank you for joining us for this virtual Creative Connections talk with artist Emily Young Miller. Miller has spent her life by the coast, and most of her artwork has had its roots in her love of the sea. Her work explores the natural beauty and cycles of change centered around coastal environments, where our human connection to nature become clear. Her most recent project centers human connection and cycles of change in a new way, in response to the loss of her grandparents from COVID-19. Now, at this point, I would like to invite you all to reset your Zoom settings to speaker view for the first part of the program. And I think I'll go ahead and stop the screen share to help you with that. But before we do, let me move down here. If you're interested in having subtitles or a live transcript of the talk tonight show on your screen, you can go down to your settings at the bottom of the screen and use the up arrow next to where it says live transcript or closed caption, and it will give you the option to show subtitles. If you decide you don't want those, you can turn them back off in that same location. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop our screen share now. Great. So as I was saying, if you would like to now, if you move your mouse up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should see the word view. And if you click on view, you can check speaker, and it'll move us into speaker view. And that's going to give you the best view for during Emily's talk. So I encourage you to do that. During the second half of this evening, we're going to move into a discussion, and you'll probably want to adjust your screen setting back to gallery at that point. Also, you should note we are recording currently, but during the discussion phase, we'll be turning the recording off. During that discussion, you're also welcome to continue with us with your screen off if that would make you more comfortable. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Emily.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and thanks to the Walters Cultural Arts Center for hosting this conversation. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining me tonight to talk about 1000 Moons. Grief and death can be a lot to talk about. I encourage each of you to hold space for what you need right now during our time together tonight, and also for yourself afterwards. My presentation and the first Q&A section afterwards will be recorded, and that recording will be available for you to come back to. So if you need to step away, get a glass of water, mute the audio, stand up and breathe deeply, or anything that centers you, feel free, the recording will be there for you. After the Q&A, the open conversation will not be posted online. So I'll be speaking tonight about the current state of the project, 1000 Moons, and sharing brand new videos of my process and the installations. I'll begin with a brief overview of 1000 Moons for those of you new to the project. This is an art installation and ongoing grief process that I started after both my grandparents died of COVID in early 2021. After their deaths, I struggled a lot with my sense of time. Days and weeks seemed very disconnected and unreal, and I found myself orienting towards natural cycles, the cycle of the moon in particular, as a way to ground myself back into the passing of time. So during all this, I figured out that my grandmother had witnessed 1,175 full moon cycles in her 94 years of life. The 1000 Moons project follows my process of creating all 1,175 moons using circles cut out of handmade paper that I am making with natural and reclaimed materials, including material from my grandparents' lives. The 1000 Moons installation presents hanging strands of these full moon circles surrounding us, which is where I am right now. envisioning the full span of a life as a physical space, as a context for our own lifetimes and those of our loved ones. I am choosing to present 1000 Moons as a process, not a finished project. Each conversation and installation shares my evolving process in a different way. Presenting the work as a process is an intentional way for me to focus on grief as an ongoing process. And sharing the work invites community into grief in direct response to the isolation and separation of grief and death from daily life in American culture. So this tonight is the second conversation in the ongoing series. And I had some thoughts about what would be ready for this presentation months ago when I was planning it, and those things are not all ready today. And last week, I realized how important it is for me to be exactly where I am right now, and the importance of acknowledging that without judgment, that where I am is not exactly where I had planned to be. And the process-centered presentation of the 1000 Moons Project intentionally holds space for that. This process has reminded me many times that self-care, self-awareness, and self-acceptance are not things that can be checked off a to-do list. Within the idea that it's okay to be not okay, I feel it's important to recognize for myself that it's okay to still be not okay. It's okay for me to not be okay next year. It's okay to be okay today, and then not okay for all of next week. And it's important also to recognize that being not okay has a real life effect on managing the responsibilities and roles of everything else in life. Grief has been characterized in our culture as sort of an extracurricular event or a brief swerve out of normal life. And I believe that acknowledging, honoring, and holding space for grief as an integral part of our normal lives creates a fuller path towards healing. I want to take a few minutes now to honor the communities that support 1000 Moons. These conversations have been really helpful for me, the virtual conversations, and I want to thank each of you for being here and being part of this process. The opportunity to speak about this and share my work on 1000 Moons has been such a gift. Your individual support and the support of organizations that have hosted 1000 Moons has made a world of difference. During the launch event, the first conversation that I hosted in October of last year, I announced an ongoing GoFundMe campaign to support my work on 1000 Moons. Early contributions helped fund my work on the launch event and all my work since. Thank you to everyone who has contributed so far. I also want to acknowledge public funding I've received from the Regional Arts and Culture Council's Make, Learn, Build grant. Receiving this help is an affirmation of the importance of my grandparents' lives and the importance of their deaths. It creates a community that supports the importance of this process in all of our lives. I also want to acknowledge others who are doing this work, each in their own way, to bring grief and death back into our experience of life. Thank you for joining me in affirming the value of grief in our lives. It's been 4 months since I first spoke about 1000 Moons during the launch event, and it has now been 1 year since both my grandparents died 4 weeks apart, shortly after my grandmother's 94th birthday. These past few months have been hard for me in a way I did not anticipate. I didn't realize how strongly the first anniversary dates would affect me. And it felt off to me to call them anniversaries, but I struggled with finding a better word for it. So I Googled it, what's another word for death anniversary? And I discovered that there is a special word for the death day celebration of a loved one in the languages of China, Korea, India, the Philippines, Vietnam, Japan, and in Hebrew. Some also have a different word for the first anniversary celebration of a death, which is where I am right now. And some have a different word for monthly death day celebrations. Languages create words for what's important for that culture to express. So in these cultures, not only is there a word created just for the day of the death, but it is a word for the celebration of that day. This is a culturally supportive way of recognizing the importance of these dates in all of our ongoing lives. Not having any of that context in my own American culture, I was really surprised at how difficult and significant those dates have been for me. I didn't see it coming. It was important to me to spend both of my grandparents' death days in an intentional way that felt healing and connected to them. I ended up filming video for 1000 Moons on both days. And I'll provide some context before showing the first video. I hadn't made any new paper sheets in a few months, and I had barely done any work cutting out moons from the sheets I had left over from my last papermaking session. Before the holidays, I had bought a tin of my grandfather's favorite tea, and it sat in my workroom for months while I struggled with how to interpret my grandmother's birthday, then Christmas and New Year's, and then her death day. Those 1-year milestone days were not harmful experiences, but they were difficult experiences that took a lot of my energy, with all the joy and remembrance and grief, love and unknowing, and finding my way forward in a culture that doesn't really provide much space to support the impact that these dates have on our lives. So I was not making paper, and I was mostly not making moons. On my grandfather's death day, 10 days ago, I picked up the tin of his tea and started making new paper with it, the first new paper I had made in 7 months. So this paper making process video that you're about to see was all filmed in the past 10 days. Now, the video. So this is the tea, and the paper pulp in it is recycled cotton rag mat board. And I have a really big tray to make large sheets of paper that was just more efficient because I'm making so many moons out of it. But I've found that I really like the huge sheets of paper. I've gotten kind of attached to them just as they are. And the process of making the paper is a huge part of the process of the project. So I'm really glad that I was able to do this filming. And the filming also now has become a big part of the process for me. It's another way of connecting to the work I've found, and thinking about what I want people to see beyond just the finished moons or even the finished sheets of paper. Is me doing this is a big part of 1000 Moons, the making of the sheets of paper and then eventually cutting them apart again. Smell has also become a big part of the project, and that's something that you're not getting in video. But this is a really strong black tea, and I'm using cold water, but I did the paper making over the course of a week. So I basically made cold brew. And the smell of the tea all week was it was a gift I didn't expect, to get that connection and that memory again. Later in this process video, I am working with kelp, seaweed from the shoreline where they lived in Maine. And again, that smell, the smell of the seaweed, is just, it's a connection and a joy to have that. And the dry paper does smell very slightly still of tea and kelp. And also old paper, old books from the paper that I put in there. And all of those smells have just been really central to memory and connection and experience. I've also thought about adding sound to these, but that's something that I haven't had the opportunity to really focus on. I have a lot of ideas about the sound that I want to put in, and that'll come at a later time. I'm looking forward to that. Part of it, I'm thinking, is the sound of what's happening right now. And part of it is the sound memories from the past, sort of overlapping what I'm doing now with what I'm thinking about while I'm doing it. So that's little pieces of kelp that I chopped up in addition to having the larger pieces. And this is also fragments of sheet music. So in this batch, I've got kelp, sheet music, tea, and also daylily leaves. And I sort of know how to make paper, but pulling huge sheets like this and doing it in a really different way with all of this stuff in there that you can see that's not blended up has been a fun exploration. Just to see how things turned out is, a lot of the sheets of paper I came out in a way that I didn't expect, and that was a really fun surprise for me. So I smash them onto the board, and then I let them dry overnight, and then I peel them off the board, and then I get to see what I've created. This is just tea with nothing else added. And I was really excited to discover that it reminds me of chocolate chip ice cream, which is not intentional. That's how it looked. And the back side, the tea stained the paper. So on the left side is the back of a sheet, and on the right side is the front. And the back side of a lot of these sheets, this is the same sheet back and front, back side's on the right. It almost feels sort of like a fossil, or just like an impression of something that is from the past on the back more than the front. And I really like that too. So when the moons are on display, they rotate, and so you can see the back and the front on each of them. So that was the first video. And I am really excited to have had the opportunity to make that video and to do that work really recently. And I also I need to keep sort of relearning for myself and sharing as part of the process that I can't do this work without constantly, or repeatedly anyway, creating space for myself to rest and reflect and heal. Our productivity-oriented culture doesn't naturally include this space, but it's often where I find the most growth. I've tried to include my own self-care and rest as an active part of my public art practice. So I will share that last week, I focused on making all this new paper and filming the process. And what that means in real time is that I missed other deadlines, I didn't answer emails, and I got started very late each morning because my body needed extra sleep every day. Next week, I'm taking personal time all day, Monday and Thursday, and I know I'll need more time after that. There's an idea that if we love our work, we shouldn't need time off from it. And for myself, I've found that to be simply untrue. If I didn't make time to rest, I would not be able to continue doing this work. Grief has been a constant process, whether or not it's the focus of my thoughts and actions at any given time. And that has repercussions on my ability to maintain all the other work that I do. Spending time in the installations of 1000 Moons has really become a peaceful and welcoming space for me. And I haven't done a talk about this since I put up 2 installations. So the last talk, I hadn't had a chance to experience them except in my studio. And I've found that it's a space that I want to be in. And that was That was really a gift. And the unscheduled time that I need after I've spent an intense session of time with one of the installations is equally important for my spirit to honor this process. So I spent my grandmother's death day with the installation that was up at Crema Art Annex in Southeast Portland. I was doing an in-depth filming process of the installation and also taking it down. Taking down the show really felt like an opportunity to reconnect with the work and with my grandmother and the year that has now passed since her death. And that's sort of new for me, for taking down a show, to just feel like this is another chance to be with the work, and it's part of the process. It's not just the end of the show. So that installation video is coming up next. So the project is 1,000 moons, but I'm not done with all 1,000 moons yet. So each installation I've been naming as the number of moons in the installation and the number of years that it represents. So this is 22 years, 270 moons. And this was, filming this in January was the first time that I really felt like the filming had become an important part of my process and a way to see it and connect with it and share it, that I didn't have before. This is also the video where I started thinking a lot about sound and the sounds of the present moment, and also the sounds of memory overlapping. So I'm excited to explore that. I wanted the moons to move the whole time that they were on display. So in this installation, I actually have a little fan running in the corner behind on the side of the window. But if they're in a space that's not a closed window space like this, where people are moving through the space, they just move naturally when you run your hand by them. When you walk past them, they're on really lightweight string. So they respond to anybody being present in the space with them. I showed just a short clip from my phone of them to a friend recently, and she said it looks like they're alive, which I don't think I had really thought that through, but I liked it. I really enjoyed the reflections in this window installation. That was from the outside. This is looking out at the same tree that the reflection was of. It was interesting having it in such a public, sort of urban space with people walking by, cars going by. It's across the street from Crema Cafe. And just having it sort of stay there as a presence that remained while people walked past and went on with their lives was really interesting. So at the end of the installation, while I was taking all these down and packing them up, I left up 2 strands just to take a minute to honor that 1 year, 12 moons amount of time. And this was a smaller and shorter installation that was just up for a few weeks downtown in Portland, around a mirrored pillar. And that was really fun to have the moons reflected in the mirror. So each one of these is really different, site specific, and responds to the environment that it's in. And I'm looking forward to future installations also being really their own work. I've discovered that I have a favorite moon, and it's this one. I whenever I take photos of the installation, I somehow manage to find that one and take a lot of photos of it. And I didn't realize it until yesterday, actually. I did have a vision in my mind of what I wanted the final exhibition of all 1,000 moons to be like. And so I set up a trial run with 192 moons, so it's about 1/5 of the total, as a corridor that you stand within and walk through. And this was set up and filmed just a few days ago, last week. I think it was last Friday. And that is where I am right now. So in the final installation, it would be a longer corridor. The corridor would continue farther, and you'd be able to sort of progress through the experience of the years of a life as you walk forward. So because my grandparents died of COVID, my grieving process this year has included the additional challenge of managing the current state of the world and the wide range of responses to COVID in people around me. And that has had a huge effect on my grief process and has also been the hardest part of this to talk about. And this is actually the first time that I am talking about it over a year later. I think one of the reasons that I see so much value in community grief process is that for me this year, the one-on-one conversations have mostly been too hard. It is a huge challenge for me now to feel comfortable interacting with others, not only because of the physical threat of COVID from in-person gathering, but because of the emotional aspect of responding to casual conversation about COVID. It's natural to experience fear from this extended upheaval. And often that fear has led to an amount of unkindness and an amount of denial. That is also natural. The challenge for me has been that I can't separate that from my grandparents' deaths. So I was thinking about how to contextualize this. And I thought about really the other work that I was doing and continue to do. Before their deaths, my art practice had been focused on a community interactive series of installations called Ghost Net Landscape. I brought in tons of reclaimed fishing gear, which is a major source of ocean pollution, and created a free and open space for visitors to make something beautiful and new with the materials. Ghost Net Landscape really addressed climate grief and climate denial by honoring our present moment without excusing it, and creating space to work together on transformative, future-focused growth. I feel like both the climate crisis and COVID have had some crossover in being globally shared, heartbreaking, and human-driven crises that are transforming our world and affecting all of our lives. This is huge, and denial, anger, fear, and hopelessness, again, are natural reactions. And I think in a way they've been as great a challenge as the existence of plastic in the ocean and as the existence of the virus. I've struggled to find a way to communicate the harm of my grandparents' deaths of COVID in particular, and the harm of that continued upheaval, anger, denial that is in all of our lives without causing harm to others. None of us can fix this alone. We all share the earth and we all share responsibility. But responsibility is not the same thing as blame. Blame punishes the past, and responsibility cares for the future. Compassion is the only response I have found for myself that doesn't cause more damage. Compassion doesn't justify or excuse harmful behavior. It acknowledges anger, fear, and judgment while reminding us that our anger, fear, and judgment are not our true north. Compassion creates space for growth in ourselves and in others. This is why, although I didn't realize what I was doing, but this is the reason why 1000 Moons is created as a space to witness and share the full span of a life. It is a space for compassion, like GhostNet Landscape. Inviting others into the space makes it a space for all of our overlapping histories, our memories, and our futures, not just a memorial for my grandparents. I do believe that we would benefit from more compassion in the world and more growth. And my hope is that the shared experience of 1000 Moons creates some space for this. I have some exciting announcements about upcoming events for 1000 Moons to be shared in the next year. My third conversation in the series will be an interview on the Omni Open Studios podcast that will be released in June. And I am in talks to have a physical exhibition of 1000 Moons at the new Research Center for the Arts in Beaverton later this year. And in 2023, which sounds far away, but also is really not, I will be exhibiting a solo show with 1000 Moons and more additional work in my grief process at the Hillsborough Civic Center. New contributions to the 1000 Moons GoFundMe campaign will fund my work to create these as accessible presentations online, in print, and in person. Your contributions will also support the time between of rest and reflection. So I'm going to include a link in the chat when I stop talking to contribute to the campaign, and a link to the 1000 Moons project webpage that has the schedule of upcoming events. You can also subscribe to my email newsletter to receive event reminders about those events. That is the end of my official formal presentation. Thank you all for being here to share this space. We're going to transition now into the Q&A, which will be recorded. And after the Q&A will be an open conversation that will not be recorded. You can type questions into the chat for the Q&A, or you can just unmute yourself to speak. And I'm going to work on putting those links in the chat.
And Emily, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. If anyone wants to type a question for Emily in there, I can read it out for her. And until someone else bravely asks a question, Emily, I do have a question. As you were talking, I was so moved watching you creating the paper and the things that you were incorporating into it, and just that physical process of making the paper with your hands. I wondered if, as you're reflecting on your grandparents' lives and making the paper, if you are consciously looking for different things to add to represent different parts of their lives, or is the paper changing over time as you create this project?
Yes. Thank you for that question. I think that while I'm actually making the paper, I'm usually just sort of in the process, and I'm not thinking about other things to add to it very much. I'm more just sort of experiencing what is there in it now. The things that I've chosen so far have all held such strong memories and connections to them for me, that I just want to be experiencing those materials. I actually thought of using daylily leaves for a technical reason. So that is something that I'm thinking about while I'm making the paper. I'm not using any sort of a long fiber, so the paper's really easy to tear if you don't have a long fiber. And the daylily leaves are, about this long, and they provide that extra support. So I didn't have those in the first batch that I made. And my grandmother loved gardening in a way that I can't overstate. It was really important to her life, and her daylily garden in particular was really important to her life. So adding those materials in was something I thought about while I was making the paper. The tea was a later thought, and it didn't come to me while I was making the paper. It was just while I was thinking about them.
Okay, we have, thank you, Emily. We have a question in the chat from Aaron. Would you consider sharing a memory with each 1000 moon section or each year?
Yes, I think I am ready to do that. If you'd asked me that during the launch event, I would have said no. And that, again, presenting this project as a process has been really beneficial for me, because I'm realizing, today I'm here, and 4 months ago I was somewhere else, and tomorrow I'll be somewhere else. I can guarantee you tomorrow I'll be somewhere else emotionally after doing this event. I think up until really recently, I was holding it too close to want to share memories. But I think that's something that's actually the guiding topic for the open conversation tonight that will not be recorded is memory. Thank you.
All right, and would anyone like to just unmute themselves and ask a question?
Hi, Emily.
Hey, Gwen.
Hi. So I was thinking about this while you were showing us the video. You have all these like spectacular video images that you're doing. When you're recording something like that and going through the process of creating the video side of it, of course, it's a lot more work that I don't think people always necessarily realize artists have to do as part of their process as well. And you had said that it was kind of like it had become part of the process. And I guess I was curious, is it like sort of like I don't know, like journaling, or like almost like capturing these moments feels like something that you're taking in as its own kind of memory?
Yeah. It's interesting because it is a whole nother layer of work. To be doing the work and filming the work at the same time is
Right.
like double work.
Yeah.
And it's artwork. The camera angles and figuring out like what you want to show. And I'm not trained in video. I'm a photographer, but a still photographer.
But
so
you're learning now.
Exactly. Yeah, you learn what you need.
That's right.
But yeah, I think it really has become important to me to do the videos and get them right, and to keep filming parts of the process as sort of a journal that becomes part of this process-oriented project, and just a way to sort of share how I see it.
Right. And connecting is what us artists do. That's the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think especially for the installation work that I do, I really want it to be a space where it's about connection and shared experience.
Well, it's really great. I love the video. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily.
It's Christine.
Hi. This work is just so moving for so many reasons. So I'm just curious about, this is an invitation to a public to participate in this. Do you have any family that are participating in it? People that have the shared loss?
This is, yes. I've thought a lot about that, and I've had
Mhm.
a variation of that question before, and it took me a while to think it through. Yes, this
Mhm.
absolutely is open to all of my family. I send them email newsletter.
Mhm.
They get the notification. But what I have realized is that although each one of us has gone through this grief process for the same two people in our own way, we all know how difficult this was. And
Mhm.
my I'm doing 1,000 Moons for the public,
Mhm.
um, for the people who didn't go through.
Mhm.
So I feel like, I mean, we weren't able to gather
Right.
um,
Yeah.
afterwards, and I think we're all still working it out in our own ways.
Mhm.
Um, and this is my way, but I'm not really sure that it's the right way for anybody else in my family. We all had such
Mhm.
different relationships with, I mean, with everyone, right?
Yeah.
But yes, some of my family has contributed, and that's been really great.
Mhm. I know family can be such a loaded thing for artists in the way that they respond to us. So that's why I just wonder,
Yeah, my family
at least for
has
me.
been great and very supportive, which is, I know I'm very lucky to have that.
Mhm.
And always have been. And that's been really helpful, I think, for me, not just
Mhm.
for this project, but just in general as an artist. But this in particular, I really felt like this is something that I need to do for myself and for the public, and it's there for my family if it feels right for them.
Mhm. Thanks.
Emily, we have another question in the chat. Carol asked, do you think you may use various different lighting for the installations in the future?
Yeah, for sure. This installation actually looks better with different lighting, but you can't see me with the best lighting. So I had to sort of compromise because this is for a Zoom. But yeah, lighting really changes the way that these look, and I love that. So yeah, every installation is going to be in its own space. It's going to have its own lighting, and that's going to be really fun.
Can I ask a question? Are you going to have any showings in Maine where they were from?
So I have applied to the residency at Haystack School of Crafts, which is 3 miles away from my grandparents' home. It's in May, the residency, and if I get it, then I will be there doing this work. But I don't have a connection with any other spaces on Deer Isle. It would be interesting actually to just approach like Deer Isle Artists Association in the Deer Isle Village and see if they were interested. I hadn't thought about that.
Mm.
I've been going there all my life. I know the area really well. I just didn't think about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Emily, there's a comment in the chat from Joyce and Tim, or Joyce or Tim Gabriel, that says your work speaks volumes and you share it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce and Tim. So if nobody has any more questions or comments that they want published, last call. I think we can move into the open conversation, which I'm going to be editing out of the video. It won't be posted online. And
there's one last comment from Peggy. Thank you. We are enormously proud of you.
That's my family. Thank you, Peggy.
And I am going to go ahead and stop the recording so everyone can
Great.
feel it's really comfortable with the space for the discussion time.
Great.